Every company that I've ever entered for a turnaround had a competitive advantage story. We have superior customer relationships. Our technology is proprietary. Our people are better. And 80% of those stories were decorative. They describe things that the company liked about itself, not things competitors could not replicate. Actual competitive advantage, the kind that produces sustained margin superiority, is rare, specific, and almost always uncomfortable to acquire. Today, we're going to sort the real from the rhetoric. Hello, my name is Todd Hagopian, the original Stagnation Assassin and the author of The Unfair Advantage, Weaponizing the Hypomanic Toolbox, available on Amazon. Today, on the Stagnation Assassin MBA, we are cracking open competitive advantage, my favorite topic. I'm going to tell you what they teach in the program, what they leave out, and what you actually need to know if you're running a real business in the real world. Misidentifying your competitive advantage is one of the most expensive strategic errors a business can ever make. You invest to protect and extend something that isn't actually protecting you, while the real advantage goes unidentified and massively underfunded. So let's look at the textbook version. Here's what the textbook says. And to be fair, as always, it's not wrong. Michael Porter's Competitive Advantage, published way back in 1985, is one of the most influential business books of the 20th century. Porter argues that a company achieves competitive advantage by either performing activities at lower cost than rivals, cost leadership, or performing activities in a way that creates buyer value sufficient to command a premium price, differentiation. A third generic strategy, focus, applies either of the above to a narrow market segment usually. Porter's central insight is that competitive advantage is not just about what you do, it's about how you do it differently from competitors in ways that are valuable to customers and difficult to imitate. The advantage must be reflected in the value chain, specific activities that are configured and linked in ways that produce cost or differentiation superiority. This work spawned a rich academic literature on the sources of durable advantage. Resource based view, capabilities theory, dynamic capabilities that we'll address in later episodes. But Porter's contribution was to ground the conversation in specific, observable activities rather than vague claims about organizational capability. Let's talk about the real world debrief. Where does this strategy hold water? Porter's competitive advantage framework earns its tuition as a diagnostic tool. When I need to understand why a business is winning or losing, the first question I ask is, in which specific activities do we perform differently from competitors? Not better in general, differently in specific, measurable ways. That forces precision. We have better customer service is not an activity analysis. Our average response time to customer issues is 4 hours versus our competitors' 48 hours. And this is driven by our regional service hub architecture. That is an activity analysis. That's the level of specificity where competitive advantage lives or dies. Porter's framework is also right that you must choose between cost leadership and differentiation at the business strategy level. Companies that try and do both simultaneously without a clear primary orientation will end up stuck in the middle. Acceptable at both, but excellent at neither. And I've seen this pattern kill margins across multiple industries. You cannot be cheaper and more premium than your competitor simultaneously. That's not strategy. That's a menu of desires masquerading as a pretty terrible plan. Let's talk about the operating room. Where it does this strategy break down? And remember, even Michael Porter, here's where Professor Porter sits down, and here's where all of us operators stand up. Porter's framework has three operational limitations that matter in real turnaround environments. Limitation one, it's static. Competitive advantage is not a state you achieve, it's a trajectory that you have to maintain. The activities that produced advantage yesterday may be industry table stakes today. Porter's framework names the types of advantage but doesn't model their decay rate in technology driven industries. Advantage can decay in 18 months. In industrial businesses, the same advantage could last a decade. The framework doesn't distinguish between these, and that is a fault. Competitive advantage has an expiration date. The question isn't whether you have it today, it's whether you'll still have it when it matters. Limitation two, the framework assumes that the customer knows what they value. In many B2B markets, I can tell you, buyers make decisions based on relationship, habit, and switching cost anxiety, not on precise value calculations. The quote unquote differentiation that buyers actually respond to is often not the differentiation that the strategy team documents. Limitation three, the framework doesn't address the advantage of being unconventional. Some of the most durable competitive advantages that I've seen were not about performing existing activities better. They were about performing completely different activities than competitors hadn't even considered. The Karelin method in competitive strategy, doing what no one expects because no one thinks it's possible. So let's talk about the operator's upgrade. How are we going to make this better? Run a competitive advantage audit using these three questions. Question one, which specific activities in our value chain produce measurably better outcomes than our competitors? Not, we believe we're better. What do the numbers actually say? Lower cost per unit, higher NPS, faster delivery. If you can't name specific metrics, you don't have a named advantage, you have a hope. Question two, how long would it take a funded competitor to replicate each of those advantages? Anything that can be replicated in 12 months is not a competitive moat. It's a temporary lead, and those are important, but they're different. Advantages that take 5 years or more to replicate because they require organizational capability, accumulation, proprietary data, or regulatory position, those are real product moats. Question three, is our investment strategy aligned with protecting and extending our actual advantages? Or are we investing based on our stated advantages? These are frequently different, and the gap between them is where the 80/20 matrix always finds the biggest opportunity for reallocation. But what is the Stagnation Assassin verdict on competitive advantage? Weaponize it, absolutely. Porter's competitive advantage framework is a legitimate and powerful analytical tool. The cost leadership differentiation distinction is real and operationally important. The activity level analysis is the right unit of competitive analysis. Use it, but add the decay rate question and the replication timeline to make it operational rather than inspirational. That's competitive advantage, what the framework defines and what the operator must verify. For more on building and defending real competitive advantage, grab the Unfair Advantage on Amazon, follow the Stagnation Assassin show right here, and go look at tatagopian.com and stagnationassassins.com for the world's largest database on stagnation. And remember, competitive advantage that can't survive scrutiny is just confidence with a strategy document attached.